Hello and welcome to Safety Power's video on the MOE's new requirement 0102463 and how it can be used to offset global adjustment charges for Class A customers. In this video, I'm going to briefly describe the new MOE requirement and how it allows you to use emission technologies to amend your ECA to use your existing generator for peak shaving. It's important to note, I just mentioned the term ECA. Every generator in the province of Ontario requires an Environmental Compliance Approval, or ECA. This was formerly known as a Certificate of Approval, or C of A. So this here is the meat and potatoes of the MOE's new requirement. What's important to note is it's a source requirement, and this requirement doesn't replace existing generator ECAs. It's in addition to it. So if you want to use peak shaving, you need to meet all the requirements of the existing regulation and also this as an additional requirement. So what's important to note is they're source-based, so you can't use a stack to dilute the pollutants. These emission requirements need to be met at the source. These here are the levels of NOx, hydrocarbon, CO, PM that need to be met at the source. In order to achieve this with natural gas or diesel generators, you're going to require after-treatment technology, specifically SCR, as it's the most economical and widely used. As mentioned, this regulation, it's in addition to Regulation 419. If you amend your ECA, you'd still need to meet the requirements, or if you had a new installation, you'd need to do points of interest modeling, just like you do with any other generator. The important thing to note is if you meet these requirements and you amend your ECA, you can use your existing engine for peak shaving. So that brings in the next question. What are the economics of this? Obviously, there's some economical benefit of doing peak shaving. So I'm just going to go over global adjustment briefly. I'm sure most of you probably are well versed in this, so I won't spend too much time on it. So the whole idea behind global adjustment is that only the customers who use peak demand should pay for it. So how does the IESO define Ontario's peak demand? Well, it defines it as the 5 highest hours of electrical consumption occurring on different days. Now, it's important to differentiate between Class A and Class B customers. This presentation really only applies for Class A customers, as they're charged much differently for global adjustment than Class B customers. And the IESO defines Class A customers as having an average peak consumption of greater than 5 megawatts. What that means, if you're to take your peak consumption in January, take your peak consumption in February and March, and so on, and average all those peak consumptions together over the year, if they're greater than 5 megawatts, you are considered a Class A customer for global adjustment. And it's important to note it's irrespective of whether you're direct connect or a distribution customer. If you meet that threshold, you are considered a Class A customer. So the IESO often uses this example. The whole idea is that if you use 1% of the peak demand during these 5 peak demand hours, you will pay 1% of the total province-wide global adjustment charge. And this is a substantial amount of money. As a result, they amortize the GA charge throughout the year, so you're not hit with it all in one month. The biggest thing to take away from this is, there's a relatively sparse amount of time that basically determines a huge percentage of your utility bill. So if you can reduce your peak during these 5 hours, you can have substantial savings. So really the target markets of this presentation are Class A customers that have existing generators that range from 750 kilowatts to 5 megawatts. It's important to stay below that 5 megawatts per generator, as there's a whole another MOE process that's required once you get into generators that have larger electrical outputs. and that's very cumbersome, and as a result, we try to stay away from it. But that doesn't mean you can't have several engines, several 2 meg engines that might add up to 10 megawatts in total. That would definitely fit well with this presentation and the goals. In terms of electrical characteristics, it's important to have the ability to load the generator to at least 50%. If you can't load your generator, you can't offset demand, which means you can't take advantage of global adjustment savings. Ideally, there's no requirement for a bumpless transfer. This removes the requirement for transitional switchgear, closed transition switchgear, which is an additional expense. So going through some of the economics here, let's just make a hypothetical example. If you had a 1.5 megawatt generator and you could displace 1 megawatt of load, the current GA savings is $325,000 per year per meg. So that's how much savings you could realize if you operate during those 5 peak demand hours. The GA cost is expected to rise to $450,000 by 2016. So this is a very real cost that is going to increase and is not going away. The cost of the environmental upgrades, parallel switchgear, installation, and amendments to your ECA is approximately $450,000. This puts the payback of doing this at 1.4 years. Well, what about DR3? Well, the great thing is you can combine GA savings with DR3. And DR3 is a program, a contract demand response program offered by the Ontario Power Authority. Entering into a contract with them means you might have to operate your generator up to 50 hours a year. Generally, it's about in the 10 to 20 hour range. And they will cover all of the fuel costs and maintenance costs for those hours. If you want to engage in a DR3 contract, you would need to do this through an aggregator. So DR3 economics, the OPA pays approximately $130,000 per megawatt of displaced load as a standby fee. The aggregator is going to take 15 to 25% to administer this program. So that leaves you with approximately $100,000 per annum for the customer. So just updating our previous example, what this does is it adds an extra $100,000 to the mix. So instead of the $325,000, we're now at $425,000. And this basically brings our payback to a little over a year. So $425,000 is the potential savings, and $450,000 is the approximate upgrade costs. There are some issues to be aware of. One of the big ones is currently the DR3 program is going to expire in 2014. It's very likely it's going to be renewed for another 5-year increment, but that is not a guarantee. So it's important to be aware of that. The other thing is environmental permitting. When you add emission control technology and you want to meet that new MOE requirement, you will need to amend your ECA. That process takes a long time. The MOE, there's a big process to go through there in terms of waiting and whatnot. It's going to take a year. We've done it several times, and we've guided customers through it. If you have any questions about this, please reach out. Happy to help. The other thing is when you do the global adjustment savings requires you to pay attention to the Ontario electrical market. Specifically, you're going to have to know when the peak demand is getting close to one of those potential 5 hours that I mentioned earlier. And generally they're almost always going to occur in July or August, but it is an added complexity to be aware of. So I've created 2 other videos. The next video is on selective catalytic reduction technology, so the emission control technology from a general perspective and how it works. The third video is on safety power specific approach to emission control technology and a little bit about our product. As mentioned, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. My name is David Stelzer. I'm the Senior Sales and Marketing Engineer, and happy to assist with environmental questions regarding amendment of ECAs or specific technology questions on whether you could do something like this at your site. Thanks for watching our video.